hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right now so you never miss an episode of Operation Truth. Send us an email, ask your questions, and very possibly we'll address your question on the air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
My name is Lou Palumbo, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Tom Fuentes. And I just remind you, Tom is a former assistant director of the FBI with quite a career with much esteem. A lot to talk about, as always. Unfortunately, some of these topics are just nagging us day by day. But what I really find interesting today are the lies that are being consistently told, or these exercises and misleading the American public, whether it's the borders and what's going on there. When you listen to Homeland Security Director Mayorkas telling you the borders are closed, I hate to break it to everybody, but 240,000 people came across August. Since the beginning of the year, almost 2.4 million people have come across the border. We're not even talking about gotaways. That's a little fairy tale. This discussion about gun control, another fairy tale. You know, the reality of the situation is there are so many guns in the country that it would behoove us to manage them responsibly as opposed to try to regulate them in a manner that would only impede the people that aren't the problem, the criminal element and the mentally ill. Never obey gun laws, not magazine restriction capacities or types of weapons. We all know that. That's another lie. There's a lie about the economy. They're trying to tell you the inflation rate is 4%, to be exact, and I stand corrected if someone's willing to correct me. But independent of that statement, try buying eggs or bread or milk or any of these commodities in a grocery store. See if they're only up 4%. New homes being built, the price of plywood and lumber, 2x4s, all the components to build a home, and making it so you can't afford to buy a new home because they're double and triple the price of what they normally would be. Another lie. This whole discussion with the energy sector, which absolutely makes me nuts because they keep banging into this thing about electricity. I came out of a borough of Manhattan in New York that every building is oil heated. If they're suggesting that we're going to transition you into electricity without entertaining the notion of nuclear power, that's just a big fat lie. And by the way, guys, these batteries that they want to put in your cars, these lithium batteries that are difficult to mine, they're coming out of China predominantly, and we can't dispose of them. Please also know, last year they had over 200 fires with them. You almost can't extinguish them. By the way, the steam turbine charges them with the use of fossil fuel, nuclear, solar, and wind energy. But primarily it's fossil fuel and nuclear. And the word that everyone doesn't want to talk about is this word nuclear. I understand why. It scared us in Chernobyl. It scared us in 3 Mile Island. I got the memo. But through time, they've managed to, through redundancy, make it so the energy is much safer. Why we're not sitting in a collaborative effort on the West Coast, for example, between, let's just say, for example, California, Arizona, and Nevada, and having a discussion about placing a nuclear reactor in a very sparsely populated area out west and letting it do its thing so we could light up the West Coast and then some. We're not having this discussion. I don't know when we're going to cross this threshold. Guys, I just came back from New York during the United Nations General Assembly Week. I was there with Climate Week as well. It kind of piggybacks or coattails it. I had a client attending a number of these discussions, events around climate change and electricity and all the things we're doing wrong. The reality of it is that if you're going to talk about electricity, you need to talk about something that's going to replace it or something that's going to generate it that is safer, faster, perhaps even more economic than windmills, which are not doing us any good. And I'm a big proponent of solar, to be candid with you. I just don't hear a big enough discussion about it. And I'm not sure it can carry the weight that we need it to carry. But once again, another fairy tale. This whole discussion with energy sector is just troubling. I know that the president in his omnipotent wisdom decided to shut down the Keystone Pipeline the first or second day in office, and we're now paying more than $2 per gallon in gas. And later in the show, we're going to start talking about Donald Trump. I personally think it would be, perhaps it's just an opinion, that let him get on down the road so the country can heal. Tom has a different view. We do agree on some things, but the reality of it is under his administration. We were energy independent. In fact, we were exporting. There's a lot to talk about that, they just conveniently mislead you. I have a big question to ask everyone about California, for example. I've mentioned this before. Cost generators, revenue generators, right? It's $32 billion in the hole. Half the fruit and produce in this country are consumed out of California. Plus they have export. They have the entertainment industry. They have tourism. They have Silicon Valley. They have aerospace. They have the wine country. How many revenue generators do you need in a state in order to make it go? You're also boasting you're the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world. If you're the fourth and fifth largest economy in the world, how is it you're $32 billion in the hole? And we all know part of what's hamstringing California and cities like San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco to start with is this homeless population and the mentally ill, which is going unaddressed by this administration. Although we did have this big bipartisan bill last year around this time, if I recall correctly, where they attempted to address gun control, with enhanced background checks. No one is yet to be able to tell me what that translates to. And I am very literate in this area. And money's being allocated towards the homeless and our children's school safety, which I haven't seen or heard a thing about that either. Guys, sadly, this country is becoming one gigantic lie. It's just about picking your topic. This issue at the border, I don't know who's supposed to benefit from allowing all the people into this country that are illegal. By the way, you're going to find out something interesting right now if you don't know this already. About 25,000 children have now been enrolled in public schools in the city of New York who are not vaccinated. I defy you to try to enroll your child in a school in the city of New York without all the vaccinations. They simply won't let it happen. We're just sidestepping and waiving rules as I'm speaking to you right now. They have basically, they're saying 110,000 migrants living in New York City, which they can't afford. The mayor, Eric Adams, came out about a week or two ago, said it's going to destroy the city. Guys, wake up. It's not just going to destroy New York City. This is going to resonate through the country. This is an interesting, dark, evil agenda that we're dealing with here. All we seem to do is make two mistakes. A, one is bringing in third world people that have to become dependent upon us. And B, this lack of assimilation. That's really what's so interesting. So let's continue to bring you in, continue to support your education, your medicine, your housing, your food, et cetera, but let us not exercise in a program of assimilation. There's also another big issue here, guys, and we've spoken about this, Tom and I both have. It has to do with this vetting process. We are incapable of vetting the people coming across the border and the numbers that they're coming across. It's just math. There's only 800,000 law enforcement agents in a country of 360 million people. Don't listen to the 335 million people the census would like you to believe. In addition to that, that then translates to, do we have enough resources or mechanisms to help assimilate people? And we don't. I'm trying to figure out who's running the country. And I don't point that comment at a Democrat or Republican because it's starting to look like the institution run by the inmates. I am so suspect of both of these political entities today and what their agenda is. I know they're all hobnob. Guys, I come out of a very incestuous background. It's called law enforcement. I won't get into detail, but I know the animal when I see it. They're all in there hobnobbing, 535 elected officials, congressmen and senators. And they sit in there and they collaborate or whatever it is they're doing. I do want to say one thing to you, and I find no comfort in saying this. I don't hear anybody talking about the treason that's being committed by the president. Our FBI director 5 months ago, I've said this before, I'm going to continue to say it until it sinks in, stated that the southern border of this country, Mexico, is a threat to our national security. Anyone that facilitates that process is guilty of treason. You are putting our country at risk. Better yet, go talk to Eric Adams, where he's telling you it's going to destroy the city of New York. I don't know what more you need to hear. You know what I love about this, guys, and we're about to go into this discussion with Tom Fuentes in this issue with Trump. We so hate this man that we're prepared to lose our country rather than let him be president. I'm not telling you elect him, because my opinion, and I hope Google doesn't get their underwear in a bunch this time, is all of them, regardless of political affiliation. Trump, McConnell, Pelosi, Feinstein. There's a whole bunch of them, both sides of it. They have demographically expended their usefulness. I don't know how else to say it. Your life is windows. They open and they close. Like when you go to school, that's a window. Education opens and closes. Then you go out and you get a career. You retire one day. It opens and closes that career. This window never seems to close. You know, we have elected officials 90, and I know, and I don't want to mention by name because this person in particular at 90 years old is still, I hate to say it, is kicking ass and taking names. This guy's still got it going on. Father Time catches us all. It just catches us differently in the journey. I have a friend of mine, full-blown dementia at 70 years old. Guys, I don't lie about my age. I'm going to be 72 November 12th of this year. Everyone is different, and you have to be treated accordingly. But I do think it would be in our best interest if we pass some form of an amendment that says you can't be sworn in past your 72nd birthday. In other words, I'll give you 72 to 80. I think there's viability for men there. We're younger longer. I got it. But when you can't get a sentence straight, that's a problem.
The change from currency systems to fully digital cashless societies has intensified fear around the world. In mid-September, Wells Fargo and Truist banks planned major layoffs as an impending 2024 recession has been predicted by many economists. Many analysts are predicting silver will hit an all-time high in 2024. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. Green energy demand will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
So I want to discuss this thing about Donald Trump right now, because this is a real touchy, controversial topic. And I'm so suspect of the government and their agenda and why they're hell-bent on taking him out of the equation. And it only seems to be him for whatever reason. Hillary Clinton got a pass. The Bidens, I don't know if they're going to get a pass, guys, because this investigation being headed up by McCarthy is getting quite interesting. It's taking legs. Tom will tell you, as an investigator, we both are. It starts out as an investigation. Next thing you know, it blossoms like a rose bush, and that's what's going on there. But in reference to Donald Trump, my opinion is, and I cannot deny the things he did for this country, independent about how I feel about him personally. I wish he could just stop talking for a moment and think before he speaks, which is what I teach my children. We were energy independent. He stood up to North Korea. He brought Kim Jong-un twice to the table. He had some type of rapport with Xi and with Putin, which we don't have any longer. He addressed the disproportionate spending in NATO. By the way, guys, we had a chance to talk about this thing in the Ukraine today. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but real quick, you know, we dropped $115 billion into Ukraine. You can't imagine what I could do with that money to address the disparity in which minority children live and to help all children indigent in circumstance, regardless of their ethnicity. This is shameful that we have our children. They're living in the streets. They're living unclothed. They're not educated. And I don't mean unclothed where they're naked. I mean not proper clothing, for example, in the wintertime. Their diet and their medicine is horrific. Let's keep helping the rest of the planet. What I'm saying, which some people have already said, is in regards to the Ukraine, just for one moment, we're not telling you just abandon ship, but we now have 31 NATO nations, 29 are on the continent of Europe, take on the lion's share of this thing. I don't know why we're continuing to escalate our involvement. Interestingly enough, it kind of came out in the media today that Russia believes that this is the United States going head to head with Russia now. And we all have opinions about what's driving this Ukrainian war. And you know what, we should really talk about this more. And we're going to in the next show, I promise you. But the reality of it is there's an agenda behind this, sadly, just like there is everything. In the meantime, as I mentioned about Donald Trump, and I want to bring Tom in right now, you know, I have my position. I've said to Tom privately, no one can arbitrate what he did. I know everybody's put off by his lack of demeanor. I got the memo on this guy. It bothers me too. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a whole generation of these elected officials. I just made reference to a couple of them. I'd like to have them get on down the road, become mentors or pass the torch. Not that we have someone like Dianne Feinstein, I have nothing against her, but the person behind her told her how to vote. That cannot be what our system is. And this guy Fetterman, this is another discussion. The people in Pennsylvania are entitled to something better than this, regardless of your political affiliation. If that does not offend your sense of decency, I don't know what will. Now, I do realize that Oz wasn't the best guy, but understand, guys, we've got problems here. We're not going to fix them in one show. We're going to talk about them, but I want to bring on Tom about Donald Trump because Tom has an interesting perspective on Donald Trump, which you're going to find has a lot of truth behind it. So, Tom, you heard what I said and what I've talked about with you in private about Donald Trump. I personally think it would be nice if he let the country heal along with a bunch of other elected officials. And what's your sentiment here?
Lou, I agree 100%. It would be great if the country could heal. Donald Trump could, step aside and we could fix what's ailing the country right now. The problem is we don't see anybody, and we've talked about we're not telling you who to vote for. We're not going to get into that. Well, unfortunately, the country was founded on the electoral process. The founding fathers said, okay, you vote for the people that you want to lead the country and pick the right people to do that, to lead us and keep the country on the right path. Now, unfortunately, this last 3 years, if there has ever been a time in this country where we got on the wrong path and aggressively on the wrong path, and I've said this before, and people can take differences. Joe Biden is one of the greatest leaders we've ever had in the presidency. Look how far downhill he has led this country in 3 short years compared to where we were 4 years ago. Energy independent, on the verge of energy dominant. Just all of the factors that were going well, low inflation, low prices, all of these issues that were going so strong, the economy, the best economy for Black employment, other minority employment, women employment. And all of that was going so strong. And all of that's downhill now. All of those numbers have gone so bad in such a short time. And I look at that, okay, 4 years ago, we had Donald Trump as the president. Yeah, he, I think has quite an ego, can be very narcissistic at times and say insulting thing and take on, movie stars and other people that he has no business even discussing, the Rosie O'Donnell and some of these type of people. But the management of the country, keeping us out of war like he promised to do, within a short time, we're in a couple of wars with Biden, but he promised to keep us out of war and did, and get the economy at a level that it's never been, probably ever, until his presidency. So now the way I look at Donald Trump is he had leadership capabilities to take on the deep state, to take on the donor class running Washington, to take on the military industrial complex and the money that they're making, and they're making a fortune out of the Ukraine war. And that's what it's always about. And I just look at it that, okay, let's overlook some of the mean things that he might have said or the inappropriate discussions that he may have taken on celebrities with or anything, and look at the results he obtained. Now, I think I'd kind of compare this growing up in the 50s, like Lou and I both did, growing up watching Westerns, the High Noons and movies like that, where bad guys took over a town and, Tombstone, Dodge City, places like that. And it took a Wyatt Earp to come in and straighten it out, or Gary Cooper in High Noon. And as soon as the town was cleaned up, the bad guys were eliminated, and the town was put on the right path, then they didn't want the person that came in and saved them, or the group that came in to save them. It was time for them to go, and they did. So in the movies, you see them riding off into the sunset, the music playing. They're no longer welcome in town, but they did what they had to do. They fixed up the town. You can look at the movie Magnificent Seven, where a bunch of gunslingers go into a town in Mexico that hires them to take out the Mexican banditos that are ravaging the town every year and stealing their crops and their women and everything else. But when it's over, it's over. Time for them to go. And I think that Donald Trump, the place that he has in my mind with this country is finish the job. When the job is over in 2028, right into the sunset, go down to Mar-a-Lago, go down to your golf courses, wherever they are, do all of that, but get us back where we were 4 years ago before you go.
You know what the sad part of this discussion is, Tom, is that, and you and I are both looking at a lot of the candidates in the primaries for the Republican Party. And I tell you, we have some talent there. I mean, I think a lot of Nikki Haley. I think a lot of Ron DeSantis. I like this young man, Ramaswamy, on a lot of levels. I mean, I'm not a Chris Christie fan, to be candid with you. He just seems to be too angry and too agenda driven by his animus towards Donald Trump. But I have to say that if there's anybody that has the mechanism to bring the country back into alignment, it is Trump. And sadly, it's because he has so little reverence for our system. That's what made him so successful initially. What we needed to do was send him to finishing school, which I think he may have been absent that day. I don't know what happened to this guy. But, you know, I have to be candid with you. There's a certain level of dignity and decorum that comes with that office, and he needs to start to focus on that. And I think he should probably listen to Ivanka a little bit more, his daughter, because I've been around all the children, to be honest with you. And in fact, I've had a head of state I've worked for 22 years, and I had Clinton there and Trump and Schumer, and his children are so well behaved. It's frightening. I don't know if it was him or the mother, but I'm just telling you the reality of it. And I've had events that we've staged on behalf of Donald Jr. I'm not always thrilled with what he says as far as his political thinking, but kid is a gentleman, and I think a lot of the daughter. But Tom, you know, here's the really sad part about this is that we've developed so much personal animus towards this man that we'd rather see the country fail. I want to remind everyone the things that Tom and I are saying would be said of anyone, regardless of their political affiliation. We're not here telling you who to vote for. We're here to give you something to think about, or what's more commonly referred to as food for thought. That's what this exercise is about. We are trying to discourage you from being spoon-fed. Think about what we're saying. Go out and be your own investigator. By the way, try to divorce your emotions from your judgment, because every time that engages, the emotion, anger, jealousy, etc., we have problems here. And that's what's driving this today. You know, I don't think Donald Trump is the sole answer, but I have to say one thing, independent of what anybody wants to say, he brought a lot of merit, as Tom pointed out, to his administration. It's irrefutable. Do I think he has the know-how to get this back on track? I do, because this guy's he's like on his own sheet of music. And sadly, we're looking at everybody in Washington, D.C. that are on the same sheet of music. You know, I keep talking about this thing with the president. I find no comfort in saying the president's committing treason. He, Mayorkas, and Kamala Harris. I don't hear that word coming out of the mouth of any of the elected officials in Washington, D.C. that are chasing the Bidens. He's committing treason, guys. This is your country. His responsibility is to keep this country safe. If you think it's safe, go take a look at the city of New York, who, by the way, not to go off on this tangent, but when Biden was in town last week, didn't have the courtesy to talk to Eric Adams, because Eric Adams has been openly critical about his policies at the border. Karen Bass is also in LA, by the way, guys. In any case, go back to Trump. Tom, I have to agree with you. I do want to say I'm very conflicted in this discussion with Donald Trump. I know you and I spoke a little bit more about DeSantis, and I thought he was going to have a lot more traction, because independent of the propaganda that you hear in the media, this is a very talented elected official. Florida's being run very efficiently, whether you like to admit it or not. And there's no don't say gay law. And this thing about books, these are books, ladies and gentlemen, that they would not allow you to consume legally, because they're basically pornographic in nature, and we don't want them in our schools. There's a lot of tangential discussions here, which is why it's so critical that the next person in the White House set aside all these differences and start to address this country as a whole, kind of like John Kennedy did, which Tom and I had the good fortune to have lived through his administration and to have witnessed, and then review many of the things he said, which are it was spellbinding. This guy had so much power through speech. You know, I tell people, be careful what you say. Words hurt. You can't take them back. Donald Trump's got that problem. He said a lot of things that didn't need to be said. He dignified a lot of criticism and comments that were directed towards him. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't like that, don't get in the spotlight, because Tom and I deal with it also. Rest assured, there are people that have unkind things to say about us because of what they think we are. We're not politicians. Tom and I are not politicians. We're Americans. We're fathers. We love this country. I love my children more than I love anything in this country, to be candid with you, and I would die for them, as most parents would. Guys, we could continue talking about this, because we got a failed parenting discussion. Tom mentioned something about women, which just triggers me when I hear this word, because of all the pandering we do with our women. it's I want to continue this thing, Tom. Your impressions of what the primary candidates right now with the Republicans. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, they're on Wednesday night, I believe it is, and I do want to remind you that DeSantis and Newsom have agreed to a debate on November 20th, which should be interesting and curious, because something else Tom and I spoke about is the Democrats have about a month to figure out who's going to really go for it at this point, and that'll be another discussion. But I'm curious to why there's a debate being staged between Newsom and DeSantis, because DeSantis is a declared candidate and Newsom isn't. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I want to bring Tom back in. We're going to have more discussions about the Democrats and their agenda. We'll be right back, guys.
Rare coin prices have exploded in the last 3 years. Hard Asset Management, one of the world's largest precious metals and rare coin dealer firms, makes recommendations on what to buy for collectors who know what they're looking for. We maintain one of the world's largest rare coin inventories for individuals seeking to diversify precious metals and rare coins. We can make strong recommendations in areas that we feel have the strongest potential for long-term growth. Call today, 844-426-4653 to receive our free Rare Coin newsletter, or register online at bmcham.com. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
And we want to continue this conversation about this election cycle because, we're trying to figure out who's going to do what. And, we expected Governor DeSantis to be doing much better than he actually is. Interestingly enough, the young man Ramaswamy's climbed in the polls because there's a likability to him. I don't know if he's ready for prime time. I did watch the first primary. I watched Chris Christie and Nikki Haley both attack him based on a lack of experience. If he could work on his feet, he would have said, look what all you career politicians have done to our country, much the same way I say, look what all the best and the brightest have done. People referred to during the Kennedy administration, the educated people, college educates, look what the smart people have done to the country. But in any event, Tom, I look at DeSantis, I think he is the front runner in the Republican Party, in my opinion, independent of Donald Trump. And the question now is, I think there's some concerted efforts to basically nullify Trump's ability to participate in any of these local primary discussions. Have you heard anything about that, by the way?
Yeah, that's all unconstitutional. The fact that they're going to try to use, the 14th Amendment, which basically was passed right after the Civil War to prevent Confederate generals and officers from running for the Senate or the Congress or the president, because in the South they would have been popular enough to get elected. So that part of that provision in the amendment is designed to keep them from being allowed to run for federal office if they fought an insurrection or a rebellion against the United States, which is exactly what the Civil War was. Now, to apply that to Trump, first of all, he's not charged with insurrection. The various indictments against Trump and the 70-some charges that they brought against him, not one of them is for insurrection or rebellion against the United States or any of that. So that by itself should be a limiting factor. But what happens is you see it with some of these prosecutions against him, that they'll do anything. They'll try anything to do it. So once again, it's going to take a situation where we're going to have, at some point, the Supreme Court's going to step in and say it's illegal and unconstitutional for various states to decide that they're going to keep Trump off the ballot because they don't like him, basically, because he didn't fight an insurrection. He didn't fight a battle against the United States. So what's the basis for that, doing that? Right away, that tells you how afraid of him the deep state is, the donor class, the elites in this country. They don't want him back because he can do damage to their ability to keep their elite status. And they know it. And they're not afraid of DeSantis or Haley or Chris Christie or any of them. Now, you mentioned DeSantis. DeSantis very early in the campaign spoke out strongly. We have no business doing what we're doing in the Ukraine, that Ukraine is not a strategic importance to the United States. We shouldn't be doing it. Now, somehow, over a period of a couple of days, somebody from the donor class got a hold of him and said, straighten out, son. we don't want to hear that. And then he suddenly changes. Oh, yeah, we got to help Ukraine. And Ukraine is a gigantic money laundering operation where money goes to the Pentagon, then to the contractors that make all the equipment for war, the military industrial complex. Then they kick money to the campaigns of each of the senators, the so-called Unity Party, which are Democrats and Republicans in Washington supporting all these billions of dollars going to the Ukraine. And then in addition, I still believe that the reason corruption exists is because when somebody gives money to a politician, they expect something in return. And when you look at the now documented millions of dollars that have gone from the Ukraine to the Biden family, and then all of a sudden Biden can't give them enough money. Every time they ask for money, he sends them billions more. And I look at that they're getting what they paid for, the Ukraine, out of Joe Biden.
You know, Tom, the whole issue with the Ukraine, it's something that was said by Nikki Haley during the primary debates. She referred to the Ukraine, I think she said it was like a cornerstone for us, which really troubled me. She got into an exchange with Ramaswamy about it, and he has a bit of a moderate approach to this, similar to mine, not abandoning it, but not over-contributing. Let the European nations really kick in here because they're the ones that more and more imminent threat. But she referenced it as a cornerstone, and I'm trying to figure out what is she talking about. It's not a cornerstone.
Yeah, I took that as one of the dumbest things she could have said, because it reminded me, you and I were both teenagers in the 60s during the Vietnam War. And one of the rationales you heard for Vietnam, the so-called domino theory, that we had to stop the communists in South Vietnam because next thing you know, they're going to be in Laos, they're going to be in the Philippines, they're going to be in Japan. And if we don't fight them there, we'll be fighting them in California. And that's kind of what it sounded like to me, a pretty unintelligent approach that somehow if we don't fight Putin in the Ukraine, he's going to be, in New York City. He might be a welcome surprise in New York City if he does something about the homeless there, because nobody else is doing anything. So you might welcome Putin based on that. But to say that suddenly we're going to have, a current version of the domino theory is so idiotic, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, Tom, the Ukraine itself is a gigantic discussion I think we should brush up against. Perhaps one of the next shows that we do, because this is ongoing.
Okay.
And as you say, every time we turn around, we're pouring more money into this hole. And I'm not saying to abandon them. I'm just saying we need proportionate involvement. And you brought out some other very interesting points regarding Zelensky and him suppressing opposition and religion and so on and so forth. But we're going to kind of let that go for today. Guys, we're going to start to close here. And I do want to say something, because Tom brought up something about women. And, the Republicans in last November, they got into a real interesting discussion about pro-choice, about this abortion thing. And of course, the media distorted the truth as to what the ruling by the Supreme Court was really about. What the Supreme Court ruling stated was that anything not mentioned or discussed in the Constitution fell under what we call a reserve clause, and each state was permitted to regulate it accordingly. So obviously California is very open to abortion, and New York and Massachusetts and other states, say like Texas, that didn't even write an exemption in for rape, incest, or ectopic pregnancy, are not. But the bottom line is they brushed up against this topic, and I don't understand why. The thing about people is supposed to support them unconditionally. Like if you have a child, he turns out to be gay or she's gay, whatever, you love them still. You're unconditional. If they're transgender, who cares? We want you to be happy. We want you to navigate life with some form of peace and calm, which we're not taught to do. But with our women, we've mastered the art. Besides the lying part of the country, we pander to everybody. We pander to the minorities. We really don't help them. The Democrats are heavily guilty with that, at the same time that the Republicans just ignore them. I've spoken about that before. And what I would employ as a strategy if I was either one of these parties, but no one does. We pander. What really annoys me with our women is that they are just treated on a daily basis unfairly. They're subjected to violence with sometimes little or no or insufficient consequence. And let me just simplify it. All of the sentencing guidelines are legislated. I don't understand why, if you rape a woman, you're not sentenced to jail for the rest of your life, because it's not a crime of fruition, ladies and gentlemen. It's an illness, and it cannot be treated. So if we medicate you and let you out and you come off your meds, you're going to commit the crime again. I believe it's the highest rate of recidivism of any crime. And the reason I say that comfortably is because of how many go unreported. They would like to tell you there are other crimes that have higher rates of recidivism. This is an interesting crime. Touch our children, touch our women, you slap them, I'll put you in jail for 5 years. That's my attitude. We've got to curb this violence thing towards our women. I've got to think about not going after unfair opponents. Now, I do know there are some women out there that can hold their own, but not enough of them. The point simply stated is we need to start to convey a different message to our women. And in regards to the abortion issue, I support them unconditionally. I wouldn't be so bold or arrogant or ignorant to think that I could navigate them through an emotional state attached to rape, incest, or ectopic pregnancy. And in general, there's so many discussions or slippery areas about should you have one or should you not have one? When should you have one? When is there morality attached? So one thing I do believe, guys, is it shouldn't be used as a form of birth control. And I would love a definitive answer from science and medicine as to when life actually begins, because then we can start to have some form of constructive conversation with our women to see where they're comfortable. That's really what it comes down to. There's got to be a compromise in this discussion. But if you think you're, as a man, you have the audacity or you have the entitlement to get into the face of a woman and start to tell her what you think in regards to her being the host of a child, guys, you're going down the wrong lane. And kind of like that's what happened November 8th. That and the fact that, guys, I know this is going to go back to Donald Trump for a moment. The Democrats don't want that word Trump to go away. And I'll tell you why. And then we're going to wrap the show. They may argue about the borders, student loan forgiveness, the war in the Ukraine. You say Trump, we galvanize this Democrat Party like nobody's business. And that's what happened November 8th, along with this issue of pro-choice. Guys, you got to step aside and step away from this issue and try to let women start to have a conversation to reconcile this issue. It's a very sensitive, slippery issue with a lot of variables, with a lot of different circumstances that can alter a decision to do or to not do. But most of all, we need to tone down the violence on both sides when they direct it to the opposing thoughts. That's not who we are in America. We're supposed to have civility here. I'm starting to stretch, my ability to find it, to be very candid with you. Guys, we're going to wrap for today. I'm never going to stop talking about the women also, because it makes me absolutely nuts the way women are just pandered to. And people don't know how I feel about this whole issue or how I treat the women in my life, all my girlfriends, my wife. And I have 3 young girls now. And I'm just going to say, be careful, folks. I'll leave it for that. Tom, I want to thank you as always for your incredible insight into these discussions. And please plug into us on Operation Truth Official. And you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, TikTok, Rumble, YouTube. There's quite a number of avenues that you can plug into this show. We encourage you to do that. Operation Truth Official. And the Gmail, in case you want to contribute to this conversation, is operationofficial@gmail.com. Please correspond with us. Please pass the word. Where do we want people to become part of this discussion and part of this movement? But it's not going to be a movement of contention. And by the way, all these issues that we talk about, we have solutions to them that we think are fair and equitable and are all inclusive, because, the key is to include as many people in the conversation as you possibly can. We're not going to make everybody happy all the time. Just not going to happen, which is another discussion about what's going on in America today. Guys, we're going to see you next week, and thank you for joining us. And again, I remind you, please become part of this conversation. Find us, as I mentioned, on these other media outlets. You can catch our show on iTunes, Spotify, TikTok, Rumble, and YouTube. Thank you. We'll see you next week. We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth.